So this is the pre-meeting for the City of Plattsburgh Planning Board, December 28th, 2020. Might as well get started right with item number 1, and perhaps Milena, you can give us a little guidance on the
I sure can. So the first item on our agenda is a Dunkin' rebuild. This is the Dunkin' on Route 3 at the, do you guys hear me echoing somewhere?
Yeah.
I don't know why. I don't know how to change that either. So this is the Dunkin' rebuild on Cornelia Street, Broad Street split. They are proposing to demolish the existing building and rebuild in almost the exact same footprint. They have submitted sketch plans for your review. They are missing a lot of details, but again, this is just that sketch plan, it's concept. So we can ask all the questions we want tonight. I did provide some feedback in the form of review comments that I provided to the board. Most of the comments were pretty typical. It's, you know, all the stuff that's missing from the plan, like utilities, dimensions, etc. The only major comment that I had for board consideration was the site is proposing a drive-through lane around the site, which currently exists now. And in addition to that, they're proposing a bypass lane / mobile order lane. A lot of fast food restaurants are moving towards mobile ordering. I think it's, you know, it's pretty popular now. People want their stuff even faster. So I understand the need to accommodate that. But there might be some issues on site with traffic conflicts and that mobile order lane, you know, having to cut in front of the drive-through lane to get to the window. So we just need to clarify how the site will actually flow with the applicant and how that will work. In addition, the applicant is proposing that bypass lane to actually circle all the way around the site and around the front, which I don't think is really necessary. There's a Dunkin' farther up Route 3, farther west up Route 3 in the town of Plattsburgh near Military Turnpike. And it's almost exactly the same site. It functions almost the same way with that one-way drive-through around the building, parking on the side, rear. But they actually have a really nice pedestrian connection to Route 3 via sidewalks. They have a really nice green space and a seating area. So it's my recommendation that the planning board actually request this project to get rid of that slip lane in the front, add some more green space, add a seating area. Just the proximity to Plattsburgh State here and kids being able to walk up the street to this Dunkin', I think after a seating area here. And I think the one up farther on Route 3 is really utilized in the summer months by everybody. So I think that would be more beneficial to the site than an, oh crap, you messed up my order, I have to drive back around slip lane in the front. Other than that, I didn't really have too many comments. I did determine this to be a type 2 seeker action, which is a little bit nerve-wracking because that means we don't do any more seeker review for this project. I made that determination based on one of the sections outlining type 2 actions states any non-residential construction that's under 4,000 square feet can be deemed a type 2 action. So that's what I'm rolling with, and I can go into a little bit more detail when we're actually, you know, in the meeting and on the record, et cetera. And Dean can weigh in as well if he thinks that that's not correct to move forward that way. But yeah, it's type 2 action. So this is sketch plan review, and we're just here to talk with the applicant.
I have 2 questions.
Sure.
One, there's signage on a parapet wall. Is it still in the sign ordinance that you can't erect a parapet wall and apply a sign to it for no other purpose?
I don't know. We'll have to look into that, Rick. I'm not sure. The renderings that the project provided are not for this site. They're just typical Dunkin' renderings that are for, you know, a building this size. So those are just representative of what they think it's going to look like. We can look into those details more closely when they actually present the renderings that are for this site specifically.
Okay, my second question, Burger King installed a sidewalk on the front. Is this an attempt to connect to that sidewalk in front of Burger King?
Absolutely. And we need to require them to do so.
Yeah, no, that's a good call. Yeah. That's it for me.
So to add to that, while we're talking about the sidewalk, is the existing survey information best we can tell based on I'm assuming that's the new site plan for Burger King. That's not collaboration between aerial photos and, because I see one plan basis on the, you have the old aerial photo of Burger King in the background, and then you have a survey plan, which seems like it's a little different, but just where the driveways are close to each other. I guess it'd be on the east drive for the new Dunkin' Donuts, and then the west drive of Burger King. If there's more information maybe available in the final plan.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, this is just that sketch, so this is concept. So we'll obviously require all of those dimensions, meets and bounds, and all the survey data to be on the detailed plan.
Yep. I saw same thing with like utilities. I would think there's I see some removing poles, I think, which might be PMLD.
Yep.
I don't know. There's not a lot of underground, not a lot of existing data on like water and sewer, stormwater on the survey, but
yep.
I would think, well, the other thing I noted was in the checklist, for some reason, item 21 for existing and proposed utilities was the only thing unchecked. Did that show up?
I don't know why that would be. I can look into that. Yeah, no, they'll have to provide a utilities sheet for this.
Yep. So that's one thing I noted in the check. It was the only one that was unchecked. So
that's weird. I don't know.
Yeah.
I did. We aren't meeting in person right now, but I did send this application to DPW and MLD. So they have reviewed the sketch plan. MLD did not have any comments. I sent it to the police department as well and the fire department. They didn't have any comments. DPW had one comment, and that was to make sure that the applicant identify the grease traps and how that will operate on site.
Yep. I noted also in the survey and in the sketch plan, it says they're using an assumed right-of-way boundary. And there's not a whole lot of information in terms of easements or anything like that. That should probably be clear in their updated survey.
Yep.
I don't know. Anybody else have questions? I mean, my only other question would be, the board's decision two questions actually. The board's decision in terms of third-party review, in terms of new entrance drives otherwise in the city, what would be considered a DOT right-of-way. I understand it's in the city, but in terms of DOT standards and review to that condition, I know we've looked at that for other applicants, and then stormwater.
I understand, but this is an existing site and that access already exists. I don't think they're doing any improvements to that. They're not widening it. They're just adding sidewalks. I don't know that it's really necessary to coordinate with DOT. I can continue to coordinate with DPW because that's who they'll have to go through for permitting for any work in Cornelia Street.
That's not my thing about coordinating with DOT. I'm saying coordinating their details in accordance with DOT standards.
Oh, okay. Yep.
The technical review of it, like McDonald's, that was one of the questions we asked of our third-party reviewer to look at traffic design. Way that's something for the board to consider. My only one other item, Milena, and this goes back to your initial finding on seeker. This is, I guess, another board, and maybe a dean comment as well. We've found very little in terms of using as a type 2 action. I'm more comfortable with a short form, uncoordinated, unlisted review. Covers everything, but.
So I agree with you. So I looked for some examples of this as a type 2 action, and the state put out a new 2020 handbook recently for seeker. And they actually provided a really good example that was almost this exact site plan. And I can read that to you guys during the meeting, or I can do it now, but I have that text printed out so that I can read it that supports this being a type 2 action.
And just, yeah, as Milena was speaking previously, I did just look to the source material, which is the DEC regulations, and section 617.5, subsection C9, again, does confirm her read of it, and I would support that, which is non-residential construction under 4,000 square feet is a type 2 action. So in that scenario, no seeker review is required.
Okay.
Can I ask a question following Jim's comments about the DOT? Presently, are you identifying state routes or designated state routes? Route 3 is a good example. Does it fall under the DOT jurisdiction when it's a designated state route where the city of Plattsburgh has a maintenance agreement to maintain Route 3? How are you treating that from your end?
From my end, I would treat it as though this was not a state route. So any standards would have to be met that are within our zoning code for street standards, for width of aisles, et cetera, for width of access drives. We would just refer to the city code, not to the DOT standards. But I think they're pretty close, right? I think the city typically mirrors whatever DOT requires.
Yeah, we've had that question in the past quite frequently. And,
Yep.
Route 3, Route 9.
And Route 9. Yeah.
Yeah, we have those issues in a number of locations, and it's just good to know where your position is on it.
Yep.
Thank you.
I just have a quick comment, and it piggybacks on Milena's earlier comment about the landscaping. When you come up through that intersection, that's where all landscaping basically ends. It just becomes, pure asphalt going forward. And I don't know if there's any way that for where their property will be ending next to a sidewalk, if there would be any opportunity for, because I realize that it might cut into their parking, because that's what they've got it identified for, parking and that drive around that you mentioned, Milena, have some greenery there instead, an area where, one or two trees, some bushes, whatever. Just a little bit would go a very long way towards introducing the idea of, some green on Cornelia Street as you start going up that strip. There isn't any. And so it's not like, we'd be basing this on what's already there. But, going forward, it would be awfully nice if we could start putting an emphasis on creating some landscaping between parking and a sidewalk. A couple of trees would go a long way towards changing what that looks like visually.
Ironically, one of the partners in David White owns Kentucky Fried Chicken, and they, to the fullest extent possible, they also own Taco Bell. They really made an honest effort to be a little bit more landscape friendly up there.
Yeah, and I know you're right, and that looks really good. Going vertically though, if there was literally a couple of trees, I just think that would go a long way towards starting to just make it not such an eyesore as you drive along that strip. But again, I don't know if that's something we can request or something that they would be willing to accommodate. They've identified one very tiny little area of landscaping immediately adjacent to the building. It does seem to me like there could be more. So I'm just throwing that out there.
So real quickly, we've had a few comments on this application. Obviously, you'll have more time in the regular meeting to discuss and ask questions. Given 15 minutes on this application, does the rest of the board want to move on to your other applications at the moment, or do you want to continue on this? Oh, Rick.
I think we should move forward.
Mine.
Okay. With that said, I'm on recusal from the remaining applications, so I'll hand it over to Milena and Derek.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Jim. Milena, do you want to do a quick review of what's occurred today? Or do you want me to?
So it actually pains me right now to say that the city and Prime are requesting to table their applications in front of you tonight, so you cannot act. So as you know, the ZBA took action last week on these 3 applications. There was, as you know, 2 special use permits in front of them, one for amending the PUD boundaries and the second one for apartments on the first floor. Both of those were approved, but one of the conditions in the approval resolution was that all of the 92 surface parking spots needed to be public, so unrestricted, reserved for the public. So on the surface, that sounds great. They had 92 spaces in that parking lot. 92 spaces will be for the public. But unfortunately, that messes with the alternate parking calculation that the project is utilizing. So utilizing that alternate parking calculation based on the number of units and the amount of square footage on site, the site requires 217 parking spaces. So if you add 217 plus 92, that's more than the 293 that are on site. So 16 spaces are missing. So the first idea was, hey, we're within the overlay parking district. We've done the studies, we've done the GIS, we've done the Chazen parking study, the city has done parking counts. We know that this overlay parking district has an excess of parking spots. Let's just have the overlay parking district absorb those 16 spaces, no big deal. But the project didn't, or the applicant Prime did not feel super comfortable with that the zoning board would really go for that. So they'd like to go back to the board, try to find those 16 spaces on site. So they're self-contained. They're providing all of the parking needs for their site, plus they're providing those 92 public spaces on site. They think they can get that accomplished within the next week, come back to you, hopefully for a special planning board meeting prior to the one in January, and be able to move forward. So that's where we are tonight. But they are here on the call to answer any questions you guys have.
I do have a question about that, and maybe Matt would be the most appropriate person to answer it. But with respect to the 92 parking spaces, will that not be included in the special assessment district? Or will that land be controlled by the city through some other parking agreement, and the city continue the SAD in maintaining that property?
Go ahead, Matt.
So Rick, could you give me that question one more time, please?
Yes, the 92 parking spaces, will that be outside of the jurisdiction of the special assessment parking district?
No, the 92 spaces, just as the 50 spaces an iteration or 2 ago of the project, will still be included in the special assessment district because it is publicly accessible parking off-street within the boundaries of the SAD.
Okay, can you share with us what that will look like in terms of who the participants in the SAD will be paying their district fees to? Will it be the city or will it be Prime?
No, so the all private property owners within the special assessment district boundaries, which of course include the entire Durkee Street lot, are subject to SAD fees, and all of those fees are paid to the city. So while per the terms of the SAD, while the 92 spaces on Prime's site will be accessible to the public, Prime will still be subject to, and this is my understanding, and Dean, correct me if I'm wrong, subject to the standard SAD assessment that every other property owner within the SAD is subject to.
You were asking Dean, Matt?
Oh, I was shaking my head. Yeah, I agree with Matt's understanding. Sorry, I should have spoken up rather than nod my head. And also, Rick, there will also be a formal recorded easement for this public parking spaces, which will forever protect the public's right to access and park in these spaces.
Okay, then would it not seem logical that those 16 spaces could be consumed by the SAD and they just be a paying member of the district?
That's a fair assumption, but in this case, based on the reading of the code, it requires a determination by the building inspector or the ZBA to allow that overflow into the SAD. So that is an option, but as Milena touched on, because of basically process and also their ability to hopefully locate those spaces on site, they can avoid that plan B kind of scenario.
Okay, that makes sense. And I also wanted to point out one other, the city county parking agreement. I don't know if anybody looked at it, but that expires December 30th of 2020. Can you explain how that's going to move forward?
Yeah, the city has a more or less finalized draft of a subsequent parking agreement that governs in considerably more detail exactly how the 69 newly available public spaces on the government center lot will be available, managed by the city, enforced by the city. So that is awaiting final approval by the council and of the county legislature. We expect to have that finalized sometime within the first month or two of 2021, along with an extension of the original agreement, which set the stage for that subsequent, more detailed agreement that we signed back in sometime in 2019.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so I think there's still a few things we can take care of and kind of check off with Prime while we have them tonight, because I know a few members, or all of us, I guess, have certain questions we just want to get clarified, and also, I guess, clarify the resolutions and the finding statements. So if there's anything that doesn't look right, or that might need an edit, or that you want to ask Prime, we can do that, because we'll have them on. Even though we can't vote, we can get it, I guess, as close as possible, so that depending on what we do, whether special meeting or January's regular meeting, we'll be able to move forward at that point based on if we're okay with what Prime has changed. Because essentially what they're going to do is, in a nutshell, is go back and see if they can find 16 spaces in their site where the building is going. So that, of course, then changes the site plan. We're going to have to update all of the language, relating to that in the resolutions, in the finding statements, which I'll be working on with Milena to make sure that's all accurate and, makes sense with the changes. So, but yeah, I guess tonight we can still take care of a lot of those things that are kind of still hanging out there, loose ends. Kurt, question?
I was just curious if Prime was asking that the application is tabled for the night. Do they have the personnel on hand on the call to answer those questions? Or do they have a short staff tonight because they weren't expecting to answer this?
Milena can probably.
No, I believe they're all here to answer questions.
Yeah. So, and I think we wanted to be able to, they asked to table it, but we wanted to still retain them here tonight so that we can still tie up any loose ends that we have at this point. So I'm just going through, I've got a list of a few things that I've just noted that, we have questions on. And the only other thing, I know we got an email about it too earlier, but since we have Dean right now, do you want to comment anything on that public hearing?
Sure. Yeah, no, so there's been some flurry of communications back and forth the past week or so. One is, well, both are pretty straightforward. in my opinion. The first comment from PCC was alleging that the PUD separation of building calculation was inaccurate. So Joe looked at that again and sent a letter, I think it went out this afternoon, just to clarify his interpretation of the code, which long and short of it, Joe disagrees with the PCC's measurement from A to B because the code describes it from a wall, and the PCC apparently was saying you should measure it from the edge of a pavilion, which doesn't have a wall. So Joe was able to make a plain language interpretation of the code and stand by the calculation, which concluded there's no deviation required based on the separation between the farmers market building and the main structure that Prime is constructing. The other issue was with respect to the public comment that PCC has been submitting, and whether or not those were being submitted to this board, and then also whether an additional public hearing was required. So as far as those comments, it's my understanding they have been forwarded to the board, notwithstanding the fact that the public hearing has been terminated as of, I believe, end of September, based on, is concluded in August, but then there was some further time period for written comments to be submitted. So
we also, Dean, excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt, but
yep.
If everyone remembers, we reserved the right to reopen if we felt it necessary.
Yep, and you have that right automatically. So that goes without saying. Yeah. So then the other issue, which PCC attorney described it as a good faith and a goodwill education, was to say, based on their interpretation of the city code and general city law, that based on a statement that they interpreted from Charlie Gottlieb, Prime's attorney, there was some final subdivision plat submitted, which triggered a subsequent need for a public hearing. Because the statement was based on Charlie's alleged their interpretation of Charlie's statement, he submitted a letter. I've looked at his letter, I've looked at general city law. I do come to the same conclusion, which is the public hearing was triggered based on the preliminary plat, and there's only a subsequent public hearing required if the preliminary plat does not come into substantial agreement with the final plat. So this board is going, if and when they issue a resolution approving the subdivision, is going to say, subject to final subdivision plat documents, which will be submitted at some point in the near future, usually within 30, 60 days or so after this approval. So only if that final subdivision plat, which they submit, is not in substantial agreement with the prior subdivision plat, would that trigger the need for a subsequent public hearing. So it's to be determined, but it's premature for PCC to say, yes, automatically another public hearing is required tonight before any action is required. I'm trying to simplify it. It's pretty kind of in the weeds as far as interpreting general city law and everything, but it will come back to this board to determine whether the final document is in conformance with the document that's been approved at, in a January meeting.
Dean, I've got a quick question. Is the additional, finding the additional and accommodating the additional 16 parking spaces, might that constitute enough of a change in the plans that
so I was describing a subdivision plat, which is a term of art. So that's where the lines are drawn on the map.
Okay,
so very unlikely that would result, and it's potentially, depending on where they put these spaces, it may not be a drastic site plan change either, but site plan is different than plat. So long answer to a good question is no, it shouldn't. Okay, so my takeaway is similar to Charlie's, which is, I'll take their goodwill with a grain of salt. I do recall this was the same attorney that told us when COVID struck that we couldn't have any public hearings at all without violating the governor's mandate, and that was back in April and March, and we flatly rejected that then because that was, again, in my interpretation at the time, an unfair characterization of the governor's orders. So this is that same attorney, whether or not just because my opinion he was wrong once doesn't make him wrong every time. But in this case, I would stand by the position that we don't need to have a new public hearing based on a statement from the attorney for the developer.
Okay, it's now 6:02, so I think we should probably move from the pre-meeting into the regularly scheduled agenda. Shalice, I believe we move right into that with no change in video.
That's correct. I am pulling Brooks and Tim over now. One moment.
Okay, we're all set, Shalice?
I've pulled them over. Tim mentioned he was having some difficulties with his microphone. I just want to confirm we can hear him. Tim, if you're able to message me in the chat, can you also confirm if you're calling in on a separate phone number and not through your computer's audio?
I just spoke with him briefly. That was who was on the phone, and he's going to reconnect in a moment on a different station.
Okay, thank you, Brooks.
And Shalice, we'll get the meeting started first. So I'll call the meeting to order for Monday planning board meeting for City of Plattsburgh Planning Board, Monday, December 28th, 2020. Can I have a roll call of the board, please?
Jim Abdullah,
Yes.
Marissa Gilbert,
Yes.
Derek Rosenbaum,
Yes, here.
Rick Perry,
Yes.
Reg Carter,
Here.
Kurt Gurbich,
Yes.
Loretta Reedsma. Loretta, can you unmute yourself?
Present.
Thank you.
Okay, and just to clarify, Loretta and Kurt would be alternate members for the first application. Okay, I don't believe we had any other business, so we can move right into our monthly project review with standard agenda items. Item number 1 would be planning board item number 2020-21, 311 Cornelia Street, Duncan rebuild site plan. Elena, if you'd like to take over and give a brief summary.
Sure. Can you guys see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
All righty. What about now? Okay. All right, so the first item is item 2020-21. This is 311 Cornelia Street, the Duncan rebuild. This is a request to construct a 2,572 square foot restaurant with drive-through, parking, and related site improvements. This is located at 311 Cornelia Street, zoned B2, tax map parcel ID number 207.17-2-16. The applicant is Tim Daly, and the plan preparer is Brooks Washburn, and they're both on the call with us tonight. This is a sketch plan review. Okay, so this is an overview of the site. This is highlighted in yellow here. This is Route 3/Cornelia Street. This is the Broad Street Cornelia Street split. Here's our zoning map showing the property is in the B2 district. This is a demo rebuild, but just for the record, I will state that this isn't allowed use in this district and no variances or special use permits are required. This is our historic overlay map. You can see that it is not in the historic district. I think there's a little tiny garage over here that was demoed a few years ago that is historic, but that's it. Here's a Google Earth image of the existing site. As you can see, the lot is quite small, but it's similar to all the other lots in this area of Route 3. There's a one-way entrance into the site on the west side of the property. It circles around and a one-way exit throughout the site. There's parking in the front, the side, and the rear. This is a site photo of the existing Duncan. Again, you can see the one-way access loop around the site, parking in the front and the side and the rear. There is no sidewalks or pedestrian connections to the site. This is just another site photo I included because you can see the site improvements of the Burger King to the east with the new landscaping, the striping, the nice sidewalk connections. I think this is just a a good image that supports the board's ability to hold this project to a higher standard for the rebuild. So this, like I said before, this project is at sketch plan review, but the applicant was able to provide the board with some detailed site plan information. This is the existing site plan. You can see the Dunkin' building in the middle of the property, surrounded by the drive-through loop and parking and no sidewalks. This is the sketch plan of the proposed improvements. The building is pulled a little bit further towards Route 3. Which includes sidewalks along Route 3 and a pedestrian connection to the front of the building. The site includes that drive-through lane still, similar parking layout. It also includes a bypass lane, which will be doubling as a mobile order lane, which is my understanding. As I said in the pre-meeting, a lot of fast food restaurants are moving towards accommodating online ordering. So this mobile order lane, it's my understanding people will order online, they will bypass the drive-through lane and go straight to the window. There's a little bit of concern with traffic conflicts and how those mobile orders kind of cut through in front of the drive-through and what window they pick up at. There wasn't really a clear indication on this plan whether or not there was 2 windows for pickup. So we'll have the applicant clarify that in a minute. Another comment I had was about this bypass lane kind of looping all the way around the building. You can see here, it kind of cuts around the front of the building. I'm making a recommendation to the board that the applicant remove that slip lane from the front of the building, add some additional green space, add a seating area. I added this picture here. So this is the Dunkin' Donuts that's a little bit west up Route 3 in the town of Plattsburgh near Military Turnpike. It's a very similar site, which is why I included this photo. And you can see here this really great, sidewalk connection along Route 3, connection to the site, a lot of green space, and they have this little seating area out front. Basically same layout, again, with the drive-through than the bypass lane. So I think that this sort of layout would work a little bit better at this site than having that slip lane in the front. The site is really close to Plattsburgh State, and other people walking from downtown or uptown would be able to utilize that green space and seating area. Most of my review comments for this plan, I'll go back to the site plan for a second, were just the basic comments, the basic details that we're missing. So we'll need a utility sheet, we'll need meets and bounds, we'll need dimensions, we'll need tax map info. The project needs to identify any permits that are required. We'll need a landscaping plan, a lumens plan. Of course, any work in Cornelia Street will have to be coordinated with DPW. We'll also need a stormwater narrative. I'm not sure if we'll need a full-blown stormwater plan yet. I guess it depends on what the plans are for the demo and the reconfiguration of the site. But obviously they'll have to be compliant with city and DEC stormwater management practices. Because the project is located on Route 3, this will get referred to the Clinton County Planning Board. So those are all the basic review comments that I had. This slide that's in front of you right now is a typical floor plan. This is not the exact floor plan for this site. This is just a floor plan based on a similar size Dunkin'. So we will need a site-specific floor plan for detailed plan review. They also provided this rendering. Again, this is just for a typical Dunkin' this size. This is not specific to the site, so we will need a site-specific rendering. I will comment though that I absolutely loved the variation in height that they're providing in this picture for the sign, and I love the variation in materials as well. It's simple, it's modern, but there is still some architectural significance, which seems to be lost nowadays with a lot of these fast food chains moving to just that simple box model. Other than that, I have reviewed Seeker Part 1, determined this to be a Type 2 action, which means no further environmental review is required. As Dean stated earlier, this is based on section 617.5 of Seeker, section C9, which defines this type 2 action as construction or expansion of a primary or accessory non-residential structure or facility involving less than 4,000 square feet of gross floor area and not involving a change in zoning or use variance. So because this project is approximately 2,500 square feet, it falls underneath that category of a Type 2 action. And like I said before, it's always nerve-wracking to deem a project a Type 2 action because you feel like you're not completing part of the process. But Seeker or New York State put out a 2020 Seeker handbook, and I'll read the example from that because I think it's a really great example that just supports this determination. It says that the primary environmental impacts associated with these types of actions are usually infrastructure related concerns such as traffic, stormwater, sewage disposal, or nuisance issues such as noise, lighting. And in communities with site plan review like ours, or special use permit requirements, these routine concerns can be managed well under those local review standards without the need for additional analysis. So essentially this review process we're undertaking right now satisfies the requirements that would be reviewed under Seeker. So we don't need to go any further with the environmental review process. So with all that being said, I know it's all a mouthful and we kind of ran through it. I'd now like to hand it over to Brooks and Tim to provide any more details about the project and answer any questions you guys may have.
Yeah, thanks. I think this is the first time we've had something in front of the Plattsburgh board for quite a while. We do lots of work in St. Lawrence County, and we go as far, west as Watertown, east as Plattsburgh, with clients that come that far. So thanks to the board and to the staff for accepting the application. You have quite a long lead time for submission. So we found out a day before the submission date for this project, for this meeting, a month ago. So we got it in quickly and we updated. We have since this time gotten a survey. All of the comments Milena was making are very reasonable, and we'll be providing all that to you for the next round. So I appreciate that. A couple points that, to reiterate what you've already said, this is a rebuild, and I do have a degree in architecture and urban design. I don't own stock in an asphalt company. So, I agree with most of what she's saying to be providing more green and improving stormwater drainage. And with respect to infrastructure, these newer buildings, of course, they're using less water and less electricity and producing less waste. It's all good stuff. Milena, I don't know if you presented the drawing C1, which had some of the green ink on it, but we do actually, in this new design, meet the 15% green area, which would be the requirement were it a brand new project. So that would be conforming anyway. The specific designs and operation of the Dunkin' Donuts is not something I know about. Tim can comment on those, but that little front slip lane, we could make it smaller perhaps. I don't know if we can eliminate it, but we can study that question. Again, I can't argue for and against because I don't run these places, but Tim can comment on that. We will be getting the specific design for this little building for this site, and we can do all the things Milena said for the next round with the lighting design and the stormwater calcs and utility loadings and things like that. Any other questions or thoughts at this point?
I'm going to repeat the question that I had regarding the parapet. Although architecturally it looks really nice, but the parapet wall where you have the word Dunkin', it seems like the only purpose of that parapet is for the signage. And I'd like Joe's interpretation rather than, making an assumption. So Joe may find it compliant. So I think we should ask him for his opinion.
Yeah, it is, as Milena said, it is an architectural form, partly for the reason she indicated, to keep these things from being just little boxes with high and low and that sort of thing. With respect to the sign code itself, the lettering would be compliant with the allowance for square footage of signage. But I hope Joe would say that the parapet is a piece of the building. It's not, the whole thing is not a sign. And as I said, it does keep these from being just little boxes. The parapets, and you'll see them in shopping centers and things now too, instead of just being long strip centers, they've got ups and downs and a little more of a sort of a Western stage front kind of design.
Rick, I'll reach out to Joe and get that confirmation from him.
Okay, thank you.
I think it'd be prudent to get an overall indication on signage for the site from the applicant and have Joe review that and give his determination.
Yeah, no problem. As Milena pointed out, the floor plan and elevations we submitted with the initial submission was a prototype. This next round will be this building for this site, this sign code, et cetera.
So it's safe to assume that your floor plan's probably going to change a little bit with doors and
A little bit.
egress and that type of thing.
And actually, the footprint of this building is a bit smaller than that prototype, which, again, I think is a good thing.
Well, I have a couple of questions. I understand this was a sketch plan to get it into the board. You have, an updated survey and probably updated information. Has there been any further consideration and discussion in terms of the slip lane and stacking for the drive-through, and then the angled parking, the way it's oriented right now, and how that's all gonna might change with the site now that you're taking the parking out of the front of the site, which I think is an improvement, but now you're going to be having more people park on the side.
Yeah, part of the trend, as I understand from working with Tim, who they manage many of these, there is a slight change in the ratio of the percentage of meals that are served by the drive-throughs and the mobile pickups and the walk-in and eat-in. Partly a result of what's happened in the last 8 months, but also a little bit of a general trend. And what a lot of people are saying now with respect to building designs and jobs in general is we're going to get back to a normal at some point, but it's not going to be exactly the way it was before. People are going to keep some of their old habits. So they're liking the mobile order and the mobile pickup and the drive-through pickup. So we found, for example, there's too much asphalt and too much parking on the present site. If you look at a lot of these restaurants, not in Plattsburgh, but everywhere, there are a lot of empty parking spaces. So we're trying to not have more parking than we need. As Loretta was saying, the front, that 40-foot setback is respected, by the way, that line got erased, but that 40-foot setback, that front 40 feet, with the exception of discussing this little bypass lane, slip lane, is all green. And there's less asphalt and enough parking. So it is a one-way system, so it's angled. And this site, actually, I have to say, compared to some others, has quite a nice amount of stacking for ordering. Some sites are quite a bit shorter and tighter, or the ones that mix with gas stations and gas pumps and things. So this should not present any hazard to traffic being backed up in the street or anything like that.
Brooks, or maybe Tim, can one of you explain how the mobile order pickup will operate in relation to the drive-through?
Is Tim tuned in here?
Tim is on.
I can sort of answer that. I mean, as with other apps that people have, you can order it on your phone. You don't have to go through the drive-up order window.
Can you hear me now?
Well, there we go. Yes.
Yes. Okay. If you notice on some of the plans that are be coming up here shortly, we've did away with the one mobile lane. So there's really only the two lanes. The one for the exit, which will blend in with the mobile, and up towards the front of the store. The people on the go will be able to bypass and actually go to a separate window up at the very front that will stack two cars for it. So they won't be in, they'll actually just drive around the actual drive-through lane and go up to a separate mobile window.
So it's a separate window.
Yes, there will be.
Okay.
Yeah, based on most of what's going on now, even before COVID, we were up to 70, really 75, 80% of our business has been takeout or on the go or drive through. So it's changed a lot, even more so now. Now we're up into the 90% range plus on the stores that have drive-throughs. Most of it is going through that drive-through window. With a 10 in a good store, 15% walking in to get food or pick up food on the go at the front counter. So we just don't have the space back there to put in three separate lanes, obviously.
Okay, and just to clarify, my question, and perhaps Milena, you can switch to the picture of the town site. So my question was more in relationship to the angle of the parking. You know, with that said about parking, you know, from people walking into the business is less, you know, a little bit of loss on parking on that side, but an angled parking that's at a greater angle, so you can actually get out of the space. There is stacking in your drive-through.
Well, we should be able to. I mean, we've been doing it with what's there now, and the width of the building we're looking at will be at least 4 foot less than what it is now. So we're hoping, not hoping, I know it will pick up quite a bit of space for us for people to back out and so forth. But setting up for a second drive-through lane or a second pickup window for on the go should help speed things up and maybe have less congestion on that very corners and so forth going around. But I think that picking up the extra 4 foot should make quite a bit of difference for us by reducing the width of our building already. Not only the width, but we did expand that back to the back a little further than where we currently were for ordering by putting in the island and so forth at the back.
This may sound like an odd question, but bringing Plattsburgh to the times, the mobile ordering lane, will that be used as like an Uber Express lane where Uber food deliveries? I'm just curious about how that applies to today's times.
Well, quite honestly, most of the Uber drivers now have to come inside for any of our facilities. It's to come in, they bring in their orders, or they'll actually pre-order a lot of them. Most of it's pre-order anyway. They'll order it and Uber picks it up. But a lot of them will come directly in to check the orders at the counters and so forth. But this second window now should help alleviate some of those people having to pull in and cross over and come in the short future, and it may not just be up here right now, but I'm sure it's coming. From what I've heard is that as people approach the drive-through, it'll automatically notify us inside that this person is there, that their order is ready to be picked up, and it'll be able to be taken up to the second window. But that's not there yet, but pretty close.
So just to clarify, when someone actually pulls up with a mobile order, they'll be going on the outside lane all over the store and then pulling sort of in front of, I'm assuming this is going to be in the front. Yeah.
It is. It will bypass the first window. The lane will go past the first window, and then they will pull into the second window on this. In an ideal world, nobody will get in the lane that is supposed to be for the normal orders, but that will happen too, I'm sure. And in that case, it'll be just like it is now. Right now, it's an escape lane on the outside. People pull in, people pull out. Hopefully, this will cut down on a lot of that, because once it's open and people get used to us having an actual on-the-go window, I think it'll alleviate a lot of our other problems, and we should have less people pulling into the normal lane for order.
Do you have another store that has this type of mobile application set up?
No, this will be our first setup with this. It's new, it's out. it's recommended, and this will be our first store with it. Not many Dunkins at this point and have this second window for mobile order. It's been developed in the last few months, and I have to guess mainly due to COVID.
Mhm.
So there's obviously traffic conflicts here with that mobile order lane, you know, cutting in front of the drive-through lane to get to that front window, and then them exiting the site. If the person in the drive-through window behind them, their order is already complete, they're gonna have to pull out into that right bypass lane and then go in front of them. And so obviously there are some traffic conflicts here at these two pickup windows that may occur. Maybe it's a recommendation that Dunkin' puts up some sort of signage to warn people of oncoming or traffic coming in front of them. I don't know what the answer is here. It's very similar, I think, to the new McDonald's that was just built on Route 9 that was in front of you guys last year. There's two pickup windows there, and obviously there are some traffic conflicts because it's two drive-throughs into one lane into two order windows. Like there's a lot happening there, and it is a little bit confusing on site. I've driven through. And I can see that same issue happening here, but I think, you know, there may be some bugs in the beginning, but I think signage may help a little bit.
I agree with that 100%. So I think signage, and anytime you have a double drive-through system, and we're just setting up in two other locations, opening up a couple KFCs and redoing Dunkin's, and their lanes are going to be very similar, but the signage is what we found to be critical. It's going to be critical, and I believe that anytime you have a crossover, you have to have the proper signage and marked out on, not just on the pavement, but also signage with it.
Mm-hmm.
So recommendations are always more than happy to address them and go ahead and to move forward with it. So, you know, so yeah, I'm sure we're going to have a few glitches here and there, but hopefully we'll work them out really very quickly. And like you say, with proper signage, and people just get used to the different traffic patterns, that should alleviate us pretty quickly. So.
We did get Melena's checklist of things for the next round, which will get put right together. I appreciate the board's taking this application in November, so we could be on today's sketch meeting agenda, and then we'll be getting it for the next meeting to be approved, because, as you know, it's Northern New York. There's a short building season. We scurry around in the winter to get stuff ready so we can build it in the spring, which is, by the way, is the time frame. This is scheduled to be started, you know, as soon as the weather breaks. The joke in our office, of course, is, you know, spring is not that far away.
Did the board have any further comments, questions? I mean, I think that staff has done a thorough job in terms of the checklist and identification of you know, items that the applicant needs to follow up on for the final plan. The one other question I would like to ask the applicant is, obviously staff has again done a thorough review of seeker guidelines with the determination of a type 2 action under the new standards. However, under your application, you did submit a short form seeker. You comfortable in that determination?
Yes, for a couple of reasons. Number one, we fully comply, and I don't mind doing the short form, and we do them all the time. It's an existing facility that's going to be reconstructed. It will be better when we're done than it is now with respect to all these environmental aspects. So, and we designed that way independent of, you know, the seeker route that you're taking. So I'm okay with it either way.
Okay. Okay. Again, anybody from the board have any other comments? If not, I guess we do have a proposed sketch resolution, resolution 2020-21. Does anybody do have a motion for that resolution?
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 2020-21 for 311 Cornelia Street site plan, sketch plan, to approve the sketch plan.
Okay, motion by Derek,
I'll second it, Jim.
second by Rick. Roll call.
Abdullah,
Yes.
Marissa Gilbert,
Yes.
Derek Rosenbaum,
Yes.
Rick Perry,
Yes.
Reg Carter. Reg,
Yes.
Okay.
Little technical issue. Sorry about that.
No problem. Thank you. I do have one other question before we leave this application. Milena, you have in that resolution identification of a public hearing. Does the board need to establish the date for that public hearing, or is that?
I don't think so at this point. I think the public hearing is held during the detailed preliminary review of the plan, whenever they submit that. We'll notice it
Okay.
then.
Okay. So we don't have to set a time frame for that then.
No.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your application.
Yeah, thanks. Nice to meet everybody. We'll respond to the comments from staff and get stuff right back to you. Hope to see you again in a month.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time, folks. We appreciate it.
Milena.
Bye.
Yes.
I'm sorry,
ma'am.
did you want to cover with them that based on this requiring county, does this require county review?
I believe so. Yeah, it's on Route 3.
So at that point, we're not going to be able to hear them again until March.
Not until
I'm sorry, February.
February, right. Yeah.
So Shalisa and Melinda will coordinate closely with you on the time frame that you understand better than we do, but I appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to the remaining application items. They really all go together. I recuse myself from these applications as with past months, and I will hand the board meeting over to Derek and the rest of the board.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Okay, so we've got agenda items number 2, number 3, number 4. They're all relating to the prime development downtown. We kind of went through a general idea of where everything's at in the pre-meeting, but just to quickly summarize, zoning board approved the 2 special use permits last Monday with a condition that all 92 spaces in the open parking lot would be public and not reserved by prime at all, which then left 16 spaces delinquent to the site based on the alternative parking calculation. So prime is asked to table the motion so that, or I'm sorry, table the agenda items this month for this meeting in hopes that they can put together, find the 16 spaces on the site, redo the site plan, and resubmit at some point soon. So like I said before too, we have a few other questions for prime just to tie up some loose ends and to maybe clarify some things or go over a few more things that the board has questions on. But at this point, I guess to start off, I'll just let prime kind of chime in on where they're at, or if there's anything that I missed or wanted to add anything. Go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for bearing with us with some quick curveballs today and last week. You guys have it right. The ZBA approved the project, the special use permits, with the condition that all 92 spaces be made available to the public. We feel as though the approach of trying to see if we can really extinguish all of our due diligence, finding those 16 spaces on the actual site that doesn't include the surface lot should be best before we contemplate any other avenue. Dean and Steve and Turner are on the line here. maybe can initially discuss some very conceptual ideas they have about where we can come up with those 16 spaces. But we would expect to have a revised site plan in short order. So, to move things along quickly, we would request maybe a special meeting just for a vote, because everything should be finalized by then. Based on what I've heard, finding the 16 spaces on site is not going to change, the location of the building. It's not going to change the design of the building. It will be internal changes only. The architecture, building materials, that will all stay the same. It'll just be finding some space for the 16 spaces. So that's where we are now. I don't know, Dean Turner and Steve, if you guys briefly want to talk about where you are contemplating this, but certainly nothing is, and I hate to use the word final, but nothing is set in stone until we, resubmit the plan, and Dean and the consultants can iron out the details as far as engineering goes.
Yeah, I can speak briefly to it. We're still going through a lot of design and math equations to figure out what we can do and what we can't do. One of the places that we're looking at is we have that amenity deck up on top, above the parking underneath. That's roughly 15,000 square foot of space. We are looking at assigning a portion of that deck. We're going to have to redesign it though to support automobile weight and et cetera. So that's part of what we're trying to figure out, but reassign a portion of that deck. I'm not sure we're going to be able to get all the spaces there. There's another space down below. Steve could talk a little bit more to this because he understands it better, but in the southeast corner where we may be able to put a partial deck and add some additional spaces down below there. So those are the two areas that we're focusing on right now. We have another meeting Wednesday morning at 10 o'clock with our geotech guys, engineers, architects, contractors, and building contractor and site contractor to try to figure out if we can put together a cost-effective way to do it. We're fairly confident we can, but it's a little early because this is something that just arose last week.
And then to Rick's point, we would, if this is the avenue we take, change all the easements and parking agreements and so forth, so that the 92 spaces will be treated just like the 50 spaces were, which was originally contemplated. I wish I had more exciting news, but that's where we stand.
Dean, Charlie Turner, what's the turnaround for this new site plan? I mean, the planning board needs to discuss a special meeting, and what are we thinking?
Well, we've already started with some sketches. I circulated an email this evening just with the whole team to try and get them together at 10 o'clock on Wednesday morning to start to look at the sketches, start to rationalize expenses a little bit more. We've already had some discussions. As far as the turnaround time, once we can come to it, it's possible that by the end of this week, we can have something figured out that we think is cost effective. And if that is the case, then Steve, I turn it over to you to give us an idea on how long you think it would take to put pen to paper to be able to get that back to the board.
Turn on my mic here. Yeah, I think what we can do, Dean, is actually probably a 3D CAD model to best illustrate how it could work. I think otherwise it's just a matter of time to confirm that the costs are appropriate and you have a comfort level for how we do it.
Yeah, I guess the question, Steve, is if we could come to that, well, we got the holiday again this week too, so Friday's New Year's. It'd have to be by Thursday. Let's say by Monday, if we can come to terms on a cost-effective solution, how long do you think it would take you to turn around the plans that we would need to resubmit to the planning board so they could review it?
Be essentially the same that we would generate for you to be comfortable with the costs and the approach. So we already have, frankly, the model drawn, both plan-wise and 3D terms. So it'll be a matter of adding a piece of that and basically printing PDF. So I think by next Monday, pretty easily, we could have some collateral if we can get it sorted out this week for you.
Well, so let's say next Wednesday, because it may be till Monday before we can figure out our math. It gives you a couple days. So I guess the answer, Melena, would be mid next week that we could have stuff back to the planning board, and then whatever time that the planning board would need to review it. I don't think it's going to be. There may be some questions that we may need to explain. So that would be our timing.
Have you characterized the approach, Dean, or do you want to, or you want to wait?
I did. I just gave a quick overview of utilizing the deck and then that southeast corner. So
okay.
So I did just give a focus in on where we're looking, and so I did give an overview of that.
Okay.
Is Steve or Melena available to pull up that and show us, or is it too early to go through that, Dean? Just to have an idea of where you're looking.
I mean, well, yeah, it's probably a little early because I just assume I'd rather not show you something that we haven't figured out from an engineering standpoint is going to work, and it's a little bit more complicated than just a sketch because there's some weight issues we have to deal with and slope issues we have to deal with. So, but I think it'll be fairly easy to understand it. And it's not going to change our footprint at all. It's not going to change. The majority is going to be in that amenity area that we had on the top. We just have to beef it up so that we can support cars. I think we're going to be a little shy with having what we think is going to be an adequate amount of area for common amenities that we're looking for in the project. So we have an idea how to get it, maybe another 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 down below somewhere as well too. So.
Okay. And I'm sure you guys are thinking about this too, but the only thing I can think of as far as changing, anything that's seriously changing the site plan would be open space or any of those calculations. I don't know if Turner's already looked into those.
We did look at that. Turner, maybe you can address that.
Yeah, I don't have a final number yet, but we'll go back through all those numbers and confirm that they're all still okay. I know on the open space we had a little bit to give, but we'll double check them. But at this point, I'm not concerned, but we'll make sure they all still work.
Because with taking from the amenity space, that will take some of the open space because it will become paved, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little funky. There's an open space, but you're only allowed to use so much hardscape as open space. So you can only use a certain percentage. So it's not just a straight conversion, but we'll go through it and make sure that it still works.
Okay. I had one other question, and it's something we brought up in the pre-meeting, but maybe Matt can answer. At this point, will Prime be paying into the SAD because of the 92 open spaces, or only if they have 16 spaces absorbed into the SAD?
That's frozen.
So the way it assesses properties within the SAD boundaries based on square footage, not based on the number of off-street parking spaces that any particular property might supply.
Frozen again, Matt.
Needs. So based on the way it's written now, or once they determine whether they can find the additional 16 spaces on site, even though Prime is supplying all of the parking needs for their own development on site, the terms of the SAD as written would assess the property the same way that every other property within the boundaries of the SAD is assessed.
Okay. Thank you. I guess I didn't realize that makes sense because they're in the SAD. So,
Yep.
Does anyone from the board have any questions for Prime or want to put anything out
I
there?
actually have a couple questions. I don't know if it's Steve or Turner, but can you provide us with a pedestrian egress plan out of the garage? As I got navigating through the garage, I happen to notice that unless they're going through the entrance off Durkee Street, the next closest exit's at the opposite end of the building. I don't know if that exceeds the distance of travel, but I'd be curious by looking at that egress plan. Basically identify the routes to an exit.
So which plan were you looking at, Rick? Is it the level 1 plan?
Yeah, I'm looking at the plan you provided, both the sub-basement and the basement plan.
Okay.
It could be a little concerning and very congested when you look at that loading dock, ingress and egress all in the same area, if I'm reading that correctly, which in case of an emergency actually doesn't give a lot of space for a pedestrian path through there. So maybe the application of another exit from one of those or both of those parking levels, which the relationship to grade is pretty darn good. I mean, you guys did a real good job with that.
Yeah, we actually have extra stairs in the building, Rick. Sorry. We have them at the ends of the U, and we have extra stairs in the 2 corners of the U shape where we have elevators, because I think intuitively you expect to have the stair where you have an elevator option. I just think that's convenience.
Yeah, if you follow the egress out southwest stairs, it doesn't appear that you can actually get to the exterior from that section of the building, because
you come through the garage where you have that first garage level off of Durkee.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
With a loading dock in two lanes of travel, it doesn't seem like it's a safe situation to have a pedestrian walking through there. I call them pedestrians, the residents that are going to egress through that area.
Yeah, that's an extra stair for convenience, because anytime anybody parks in a parking garage, and I think many of the residents will probably enter the building that way, they'll park and then walk to the elevator. And the stair is really there as a convenience for maybe those that only have a level to navigate. But again, that particular stair is not a required stair as far as egress or safety. It's simply there as a convenience.
But once, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm looking at your level 1 plan. So you go up to level 1, and when you get to the end of those stairs, I don't see where you identify an exit door. It may just not be printed on there. I think it's an important safety feature to look at.
Yeah, it actually comes into the elevator lobby is where it would occur.
Okay.
So there's an elevator lobby kind of tucked into the L created by the stair in the elevator.
Okay, I see one door in that lobby that goes into a 1-bedroom, one door that goes into a 2-bedroom, and then you have the trash room. I don't see another door that would provide egress.
It's not required for egress. It's not a required exit. It's a convenient stair.
But I don't see where it exists on this plan.
It would access the elevator lobby. It's the answer. So that's easy enough to add. The plan
Okay, so
really more schematic, Rick.
Let's take it back a step. You go up the stairs to level 1. How do you get out of the building from that point? There's no exit door.
Yeah, there will be an exit door from every floor. Milana, you're pulling it up, I take it?
I'm trying to, yes.
Okay. I don't recognize that.
It's Dunkin' Donuts.
Getting closer. Okay, go to A 2.3.
2.3, yeah.
There you go.
Okay.
Okay.
That's the one that I'm referencing. Yes, that's the first building level.
Can you zoom in on that a bit, Milana? Is that possible?
I don't think I can zoom out in on it. Let me try.
Okay. No, that's going in the wrong direction.
Yeah, it won't let me zoom in any more than 100%.
Okay. Will there be an access into the stair, Rick, from the level 3 units that you see on the floor plan?
Yeah, I'm looking at your plans right here.
Mm-hmm.
A lot easier for me to follow it.
Okay.
So the stairwell has a door going into that lobby.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
What I don't see on here, Steve, is where you egress the building. You have 3 doors other than the stairwell. One of them goes into a 1-bedroom unit.
Mm-hmm.
One goes into a 2-bedroom unit, and the other goes into the trash service.
Right.
Don't see a door that goes to the exterior.
Because you can't. You're 10 feet above the exterior at this elevation.
And you can't get through other than the drive-through at the level. That's
Yeah,
my
you have.
point.
Yeah, you have to enter the stair and go down to exit at the park.
Are you expecting people to go through the traffic lane of ingress, egress, and loading zone? That's my question. If it is, we should identify that, and that's why I requested an egress plan that shows something, how people get out of the building. In case of an emergency, you got to guide people.
Elena, I've got a version of this that we can zoom in on. Do you want to share your screen?
Steve, I also assume these are all code issues that we're going to have to address.
Yeah.
The plans.
Yeah, and again, that's not a required stair as far as egress. It's more of a convenience. But the way you would access that stair is at the parking level, as Rick is saying, as you normally would any stair in a parking structure, where you walk to the stair and you typically walk down the drive lane of a parking structure to get to it. So the egress doesn't occur on this level because we're up 10 feet above the parking below. So the loading dock, you have to go to a 2.1, the previous drawing, Matt, 2.2.
2.2.
Yep.
Okay.
There you go. If you can just identify a pedestrian means to get out of the building within that traffic lane, I think it would be to the southwest if you put your cursor there.
Mm-hmm.
Over here, Rick?
Can you just scroll up? If you look, if that's going to be the pedestrian way out of the building, it should be noted somehow, because we have a truck loading zone and 2 driving lanes that converge in that one spot. Where would the pedestrian exit the building?
Well, again, it's not a required exit, Rick. It's a convenient stair for those who are parking in the building. So otherwise, the answers are walking down the same area you'd walk from your car down the drive lane. So it's open.
I'm not going to pretend that I'm current on the code, but what I can say is when you get down to that sub level and this is your path of egress, it may exceed the distance of path of egress. I'm just asking you to look into it. And
Yeah.
if you expect people to walk out there, just show them the way. I think that's a simple request.
Yeah, we can do that, Rick. The answer
That'd be perfect.
problem as far as code requirements, because we've already researched that. As far as the required route and the travel distance, that's served by the two end stairs and the corner stair by Durkee. So we technically wouldn't need to have a stair there at all, but it's there for convenience.
Yeah, well, if you're exiting that first living level, or if you're in the sub basement level and you're exiting out that stairwell door, then you want to exit the building. It should be identified.
Yeah, it will be on the fire safety plan.
Perfect. That's all I'm asking.
How we do that?
Yeah.
That's what you're asking, is the fire safety plan.
Yes.
Okay.
Elena, would you be able to pull up that parking table that you sent out to us today? I think it would just be good to put it on record and put it out there where the current totals are at as far as what's being removed, what's being added.
I don't know that I have that saved anywhere. I have it in an email that I sent to you guys.
Okay.
Let me see what I can do.
All right.
I can kind of summarize it, Derek, maybe when she's pulling it up. Just so we needed 217. We were utilizing 16 of the spaces in the 92, the surface lot next door. So that left us 16 shy for our use because we added more public parking spaces. So we were at 293 minus the 92 is 201, and we needed 217 dedicated based on our alternative parking.
Okay, thank you, Dean. I was referring to another table that Melena had put together on my request earlier today with all the parking spaces in the downtown district.
Yeah, I've got it right here. I'm just trying to crop it and save it as an image so I can pull it up.
Okay.
Okay. Can you guys see that?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I'm not going to take credit, Derek. I'd love to, but Ethan pulled this together from the GEIS and other parking studies we've completed. This is just showing the existing parking supply, future parking supply, which includes the Arnie Pavone parking lot, the expansion of the Broad Street parking lot, and the public parking spaces on the Durkee Street lot. And then the third column, obviously, you can see is the change in public parking supply between the two, existing and future. I think the whole point of this table was to prove that there was ample capacity within the special assessment district, that overlay parking district, to be able to absorb the 16 spaces that the project is deficient. The project isn't going to be going that route now. They're going to try to find all those 16 spaces on site. But I think these are still good numbers for you guys to see and understand in the overall scheme.
Yeah, thank you. And I just thought about it because of the change in the number of public spaces. I just wanted to see what that looked like. And again, we are just focusing on, the site and the, the PUD that we are presented with right now. But again, we know it all kind of ties in together. So I thought that would be good to put out there on the record. Does anyone else from the board have any questions for Brian?
I have a question for Dean. With respect to the easement document, if it's submitted to us only in draft form, unsigned and uncommitted to, I know that it's a process, but is that a document that is binding in any way? And if it isn't, what do we do? Do we put that within our motion when we vote on it?
What document again?
There's the easement document that we have in draft form.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there, with the working draft resolution we have already, I think there is language touching on the easement itself. And so, yes, it would make it as a condition, likely make it as a condition of approval that an easement were to be executed and recorded as part of that approval.
Okay.
And the easement could have as much or as little specificity as you want. I would prefer more specificity, which would touch on the number of spaces, not just a generic easement, but actually have some meat to the bone there.
Okay. My last question for the day, and I'm going to go back to Durkee Street. We have submittals that show no fewer than five times that Durkee Street is involved in either traffic, parking, improvements, easements, and then yet there's a notation that it's going to be considered by others. How do we handle that?
Is that a question for me?
Yes, please.
Well, touch just real quickly on the easement with respect to the easement on Durkee Street. That just is just because a little blip of the prime parcel touches on part of the sidewalk. So that part's a smaller issue. As far as the overall parking plan for Durkee Street, that is not going to be part of this board's approval. That's outside this board's purview. So I don't know exactly what your question is. Are you seeking to put a condition over what occurs on Durkee as part of this process?
Let me clarify what I'm looking at. I'm looking at a property line that actually includes as much as half of a parking space in this diagonal parking down to about a third of a parking space. How do we see that within a site plan and not recognize that it's part of a public street?
Yeah, so that's what I described it as a blip. It's more accurate to describe it as you did. And that will be controlled by an additional easement agreement between Prime and the city, which would, again, similar to any easement, be recorded and forever make it publicly accessible and subject to that easement agreement itself. So that specific parking or that specific area that is encroaching onto the city, the public area, will forever be a public space. I was trying to touch on the other aspects of Durkee farther away from that encroached area, and that part would be outside this board's authority.
Okay. Melena, can I ask you, can you just make notation in our proposed resolutions that we identify that the easement contain the language that Dean just mentioned?
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
Hey, Rick, going back briefly to the question that you previously had asked about the city's agreement with the county and the expiration date of December 31st, 2020. I took a look at the agreement. There is actually language that preserves the meat of that agreement. as long as the expansion of the county's parking lot was actually completed, which of course it was late in 2019. So the obligation of the county to make those 69 spaces public and the other provisions governing city management of those spaces and collection of parking fees, all of that survives the listed expiration of the term because the expansion of the lot was completed. So that was a protection that we put in to make sure that the city's investment was protected.
Perfect. Good note taking. I think it's a valuable piece to the whole scenario.
It very much is, yes.
Milena, back onto Durkee Street. I know you sent us the updated easement plan. Does that reflect what we just talked about with Dean about Durkee Street?
It does. It includes that section of Durkee Street.
Okay.
As far as resolutions and finding statements are concerned, I'll wait obviously to see the new site plan from Prime. But I'm under the assumption the only thing that we're going to have to change on the back end is any reference to the public parking spaces, which will now be 92 instead of the 76. And also the total on-site parking spaces will, I think it'll be 317 or whatever it is now, with those additional 16 spaces. So there should be very little administrative work on the back end as far as the resolutions and finding statements are concerned, because like Prime said, there'll be little to no impact to the actual site plan itself with the addition of those 16 spaces. So I think we should be good to go. I don't know if the board wants to discuss a possible meeting date for that special meeting, or if they want to hold off until the regular January meeting.
Yes, at some point. I just got a couple other notes I had from various conversations and things that came up. So, and I think Rick, you had mentioned something about on the plan, there seems to be 2 property lines on the site plan. Is that what it was?
Going back to A2.3, both symbols are the same. I realize that one of the symbols is representing the building line and the other is the property line, but they're both the same. So there's no distinguishing characteristic if you don't know which is which. My point is, I think it just should be clarified so that there's really no misinterpretation, that where they identify the scope of development line in the property line, they are different. They have different purposes. Does that make sense, Steve?
This is an A2.3, Rick?
A2.3, yes.
Okay, we'll get that clarified.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I guess I do have one other question. Sorry about that. On the original site plan, we had an access point where the fire department could man carry ladders to get to second floors. I had a conversation with Scott Lawless, and he was very clear that any situation they could handle with that access point. Right now, as the site plan exists, how does the fire department or any other emergency responder access the amenity terrace?
So it'll be the same way, Rick, where you come in off of Durkee and come into the parking as you would have before coming under the building, where you had that section before farther up Durkee to get to the amenity terrace. So in this case, they do have to navigate a little farther under, let's say, a soffit. But you would come to the middle of that first parking bay on the south side, make a left turn and go up that partial ramp, and that's open to the sky.
Okay.
So that brings you to that courtyard.
There's plenty of clearance for an ambulance if
Yeah.
they have to access it there. Okay.
Depending on the type of ambulance, but yes.
Okay, in the means to access the amenity area from that parking area, will that be through a gate? I know you want it for convenient or for, security purposes. They'll have like an emergency gate that they can access that area from.
Yeah, that's a question for Dean. I don't know that there'd be any.
No, it's not. The building will not, the building lot will not be gated. It'll be open.
Yeah, at this point in time, underneath and around, not on the 92 spaces, but at this time, we'll probably just handle our lot with permit parking and or signage.
Okay, let me just clarify my question a little bit better then. As you go up the ramp, the parking ramp to the amenity terrace, to go from, will it be at the same elevation where you can access the amenity terrace from that last level of parking?
Yeah, there's actually a ramp, Rick, at the high end of that ramp that gets you up to the amenity terrace. There's a accessible ramp and stairs.
Okay, is there going to be any kind of access, security access between the two?
Not that I'm aware, but that's a question for Dean.
Yeah, at this time, to monitor parking or to allow access to the amenity terrace, we'll probably just handle with signage and permits.
I think that's sufficient.
Yeah.
That's it for me.
Okay.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions for Prime? Okay, I think the last couple things I had are basically they have to do with just editing the finding statement and the resolutions. There's just a couple notes on how we want things to read, and the way we've been doing that is basically me and Milan and I are going back and forth and editing those things and then uploading them, letting the board know when they are final, or at least up to date, and then everyone can take a look at that. And again, we're going to have to edit those again, along with what I just mentioned, but also for the new parking spaces or whatever resolution comes about of the 92 spaces public, and then the 16 that may be on site. So I'll continue to work with Milena on those, and as we get closer to the revised site plan that Prime is going to do. So if there's nothing else for Prime, I guess now would be the time for the board just to discuss if we would like to do a special meeting. If Prime gets, well, we'd have to schedule a date now if we want to do a special meeting, assuming a date that we think the plans would be available to us with time to look through them. And then also, if we don't want to do a special meeting, then it would just go to the next January meeting, which is the 25th. So does anyone have any, I guess I'm asking the board, do we want to look at scheduling a special meeting just to review the revised site plans from Prime and potentially take an action at that time? I know it's something we've talked about in the past when we thought we were going to be able to vote, but it would, prevent us from having to spend a lot of time if there's a busy January meeting. But I guess I'm open to thoughts from the board.
Well, look, can we ask Prime again to try to pin down the best they can the date where we would expect to receive those finalized documents?
Sure.
Wednesday we'll have revised plans that hopefully work, or an indication of what we are able to do. So a week from this Wednesday.
That'd be Wednesday, January 6th.
I believe so. Yeah, I don't have a calendar in front of me.
Okay. So that would probably put us at the week of the 11th, I would think, giving people enough time to review the final site plan or the revised site plan.
Earlier in the meeting, there was a reference made, I don't remember who made it, but they were going to go back to the zoning board regarding those 92 spaces. Will that impact our meeting date?
I believe that only goes back after we have taken action.
Okay.
And it doesn't necessarily, I'll leave it with what Derek said.
Okay.
The way that the zoning board, I guess, did their conditioned approval, based on what we approve or deny, I guess only if we approve, then it goes back to Ron with the zoning board for him to just review what we've approved. And if it's not a substantive change from what the zoning board approved, he can just kind of sign off on it and say it's okay. If he thinks that there was significant changes, then it can go back before the zoning board. Milena and Matt, am I?
Yeah, close enough. The standard wasn't significant or insignificant. It was, what's the word? Inconsistency. Yeah, inconsistent.
So if we find the 16 spaces, the planning board approves, then the zoning board would have one final opportunity to deem whether or not the method by which those 16 spaces were obtained was consistent with their resolutions. If they say it was, that's it, and the project's fully approved.
So yeah, to answer the question, Rick, it goes back to zoning only after we take action.
So I guess our question is, do we want to take action or at least have a special meeting prior to the zoning board?
Which would be the 18th, I assume?
Yes, I think so.
They meet the 19th. 18th is a holiday.
The 11th is.
The 11th is the date we got to pick. Yeah.
Is the 11th a holiday?
No.
I'm good with the 11th.
In keeping with Mondays, would the 11th give enough time for everybody and work for everybody at the typical 6 o'clock time?
Works for me.
I'm good.
Okay, and
That works for me.
okay.
What time would we be meeting? Regular time, 5:30 to discuss and then 6 o'clock meeting? Or just start at 5:30? I don't know that we need do we need a pre-meeting?
Under the open meetings law, you don't. So if the board's ready and able, we could start at 5:30.
Okay.
Just we need that direction so that we can properly notice it.
Right.
Works for me, either one.
Yeah, 5:30 on Monday, the 11th. That would be good.
Okay, let me just check. That would work for me. So yes, Rick. Reg, yes.
Yes.
Marissa, yes.
Yes.
Loretta, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And we did settle on 5:30, right, Derek?
What's that?
We did settle on 5:30.
Yes, 5:30.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, just for the notice, is the 5:30 including a pre-meeting or no?
No, I think we can just start.
Right.
That's just our normal start time, so we might as well start then.
Thank you.
Okay, so January 11th at 5:30 will be the special meeting. And if there's a delay in the plans, then obviously we may have to move the special meeting or just cancel it and go right to the January meeting. So we'll play that by ear and wait to see when we get the plans.
Thank you, everyone. We appreciate the accommodation because of this little curveball we got handed.
Yeah, we'll do everything we can to have everything to you by Wednesday. Hopefully we can have a good solution. thank you for your time tonight. Happy New Year, everybody. We won't
Happy
see
New Year.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Happy
thank
New
you.
Year. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Did our chairman leave?
Jim, where's Jim?
The meeting adjourned?
Not yet. We gotta bring Jim back.
He's still on.
Did Derek leave us?
Yeah. Make sure you're clarifying a number of points that really meant a lot to me anyway.
Rick, I agree that the egress items are a big deal. And yes, having that clearly delineated in signage and in making sure that there's a pathway marked out is the importance of that can't be overstated. So thank you for bringing that up.
I think it'll be of value to them as well.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, sorry, I stepped away and I heard you made it through everything.
Mhm.
Yep.
I think, and are looking to adjourn.
Mhm.
Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll make the motion.
Okay. Have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Have a great new year, everyone.
Yeah, Happy
New
New
Year,
Year,
everybody.
everybody.
We need.